The journey that you've been on from a bodybuilding point of view, I know you'll reflect on it now as a somewhat the fractures will be the thing at the front of your mind, I can imagine. But
Yeah.
what did you gain as an individual throughout the sort of the peak of your career, the training, the progress? Because it won't have all been the negatives that you might now reflect on that have led to a bit of a change. There's obviously a
Yeah.
whole lot of positives, whether that's connections, network, people you've met, all the
Yeah.
experiences you've had. What have been the highlights from that career for you?
Yeah, as you mentioned, that definitely the networking element. I mean, we've got a really good podcast now, me, Josh, and Joe, and the ability to have networked and met people in the industry, which is, it's tough. It's hard because I think bodybuilders in general get quite a bad rap with who they are as individuals. So it's nice to have met, like, I suppose, the good guys and do a couple of collabs. I don't really like to call them collabs just because it's every time I meet someone and they're like, oh, you collabed with Joey D. It's like, well, he's a mate of mine and I like him. I'm not collabing him. I'm just going to go and see him. But the networking has been fantastic. The events like Body Power and seeing finally kind of putting faces to names that have been. I only know people as Instagram names. So I'm like, oh, like J_97 finally found your face. But I suppose that another element of that has been the discipline that it's instilled. Having to go through a 6 month prep whereby you can't go out and eat, you can't have alcohol. You have to say no to social events. What I'm noticing now is that ability to really dig deep in different scenarios now, whether it's like I'm doing a 10K cycle ride or we'll do like a boxing drill and I'm like, I can see people flagging and I can motivate them and pick them up. So there's definitely those sort of areas that I'm very grateful to have had. So that mixture of discipline and networking has been definitely the main two.
From a commercial point of view, the how long have you been full time with YouTube?
Full time with YouTube, good question. Must have been, I'd say probably about, I'll have to quit. There's a YouTube video on my channel called I Quit, and I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I just left GNC. I just wasn't. They weren't happy with my performance there, and I can understand that. I used to sit out the back with all of my kit. I used to sit up like my laptop and my screen, and like they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, oh, "I'm doing it on my lunch break." But obviously, there was only one person that worked every time at GNC. So whenever a manager came in and I was at the back, I was like, "Oh shit." So I think they got a little bit happy, and then the chain closed anyway. So I got out just in time. So yeah, I think the last 4 to 5 years have been kind of full time. I was working for Luke Johnson at Shredded by Science, now the PT Collective, kind of doing videography work for him, and he got to a position where I was like, right, you need to go now. Like not in a negative way. It was like you can see
Yeah.
the progression. It's time to let you go. He's given me the tools, and I will always be incredibly grateful for that guy. So yeah, the last 4 to 5 years, it was very. I mean, it's very daunting doing it straight away. I suppose when you lose that safety net financially, and it's all on you. You've got rent and bills to pay. It can really creep up, and I suppose at that point is when like the kind of stress levels took the next notch up.
You've already mentioned it in terms of discipline, but I know that the 2 years that I spent almost solely on power building, let's call it, not really a thing, but
Yeah.
let's use it contextually here for the sake of argument. The 2 years of real focus on body composition that I experienced and put myself through have given me a new understanding of discipline, control, and understanding my relationship with that control that I can now carry with me into my day to day life and actually let it spill over into all aspects of my day to day life. So I can imagine commercially, as an entrepreneur, as running your own business, running all these things on a day to day basis, spinning many plates, there are so many elements of the discipline from the bodybuilding journey that you've been on that really underpin all that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I suppose it's weird because I used to. There was a couple of years ago when I used to look at the kind of 5 a.m. cold shower getter uppers and think, "Well, you idiots!" And then I'm like, I get up at 5, I have my ginger shot, and I have a cold shower, and I'm thinking, "Oh, God, I've turned into the person that I used to mug off," which is like it's absolutely fine, I suppose, just sort of natural progression. But it is there's so much benefit to doing that, and that routine. I am like a creature of like I need that routine, and I feel I my mind becomes a little bit skewed when I'm off routine. But I've stepped away from the stage. I have got a lot better at being a little bit more spontaneous, which is nice. I've kind of got that portion of my life back, but I still need to, even if I go out, like I went out last night, I'll still need to go, right, in order to get my 8 hours, I've got to go to bed at this time and wake up at this time. It just means that work gets shifted, and it's manageable, it's doable. But I think when you're in that bodybuilding world, there's no room for error in the bodybuilding, and now there's not necessarily room for error, but it's more flexible, I suppose.
you're very punitive on yourself, aren't you? That there's self-destructive elements where you just implode if you feel like you've done something wrong, or if you've cut a corner, if you've
Yeah.
eaten at the wrong time, consumed too much, all this stuff. And from a psychological point of view, obviously you've spoken about it quite openly online recently in terms of your departure from bodybuilding in its formal sense.
Yeah.
But what was your mental health like entering bodybuilding in the first place, and how has that? When do you think it really turned? When was the moment where you decided, you know what, this isn't giving me what I once got from it?
I think probably three or so years ago, and when you can start to kind of visually see the impact of what bodybuilding is doing on particularly like relationships, I think at that point you're like, what do I do here? And it's really hard because you're like, well, bodybuilding is essentially not my job, but what that entails is a job, content creation, clients coming from it. So it's like you're almost in the you get into this really tricky spot with mismanaging time and kind of just making excuses, and it's a really weird spot to be in because you can see visually the impact that it's having on people, but there's almost a stubborn element of it, and it's almost this like quite cold, emotionless character that I was. And it was around at that point I was like, right, I need to do something about this. The plan was to compete, but then lockdown happened because of coronavirus, so it got put back. And then even during that time, I think for a lot of people, they regain some form of normality and they've regained some life when lockdown happened because you're like spending more time with people. And I had that. So it was almost like that topped me up a little bit to the point where I was like, well, got enough in the bank now. I've spent enough time with you. I'm going to go back to that world. And I remember saying to my partner at the time, I'm thinking of competing. It was just like, just, that straight drop. And I thought, surely I can't inflict this on someone. It's horrific, but I want to go out on a high. I want to finish it. I want to do the show. Managed to win it, but it was a bit, it was incredibly bittersweet because we did separate at the beginning of that. So it was tough. Like I said, it's very bittersweet. But I'd say when you can start visually seeing the impact on people, as much as they're supportive, that's almost a little bit of a facade because you can deep down see that, behind the supportive nature, it's a little bit of resentment. So yeah, I'd say the last three to 4 years when my mental health took a little bit of a decline.